Your Holiness, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. On stage, we have leaders of higher education institutions, several of whom you've already met. We enjoyed our ceremony with you yesterday in conjunction with Nova Southeastern, our wonderful partner across the street. We know that you've had a ceremony today also at Florida Atlantic University, also one of our partners, and we now welcome you to Broward College. Thank you for being here. This event originally was going to be just a conversation between those of us in leadership roles about higher education, but we thought what a wonderful opportunity to open up to our community, and so we have some faculty and teachers here and some students as well. I will ask you a couple of questions, Your Holiness, to start off, and then we'll open it up as we move forward and invite our other panelists here on stage to join us as well.
Good.
So, I'll start, if it's okay.
Yes.
Your Holiness, in many of your books and public talks, you have emphasized that all members of the global community are profoundly interdependent, economically, environmentally, and in many other ways. And therefore, it's essential that we cultivate a sense of universal responsibility. In your view as educators, how should we in our higher education communities provide leadership in this responsibility to our global community?
I think, of course, firstly, I'm not educationist. I have no experience or knowledge about modern education. Your question, I think all, usually we call sentient being, the being who have cognitive sort of capacity, and accordingly, you see some thinking power. So we are one of them. Then all, by nature, they are, their purpose is to survive. Even non-sentient beings, like plant, these also have the right to survive, existence. So it's a certain, even chemical level, they have some sort of capacity how to survive. So then those beings who have the cognitive power, also I think I conscious here, these things, they help us for survival. Generally, you see that very limited. So immediate sort of danger, see or feel, then take protection. Beyond that, not much concern, not much knowledge. But we human beings, now, another sort of potential, capacity, you see, think much sort of as a long-term or much larger area. Here, education have the important role. You see, make known these factors, and then how to deal these things. I think education, I feel, the main purpose of education is guide us the proper sort of life or our goal, happy life. So now today, of course, I think the whole world, whether they can do or not, you see, that's a different matter, but everybody realize education is so important. However, I feel whether I think it's something wrong, then please make correction. You know, I always have this sort of view, and also mention to share other people. In the European continent, and 1,000 years ago, about 1,000 years ago, the separate education institution started. So that means the church sort of was the theology is not sufficient. So there are many more new subjects. So it is necessary to create separate education institution. So seems at that time, those subjects, church can sort of say, manage. And those something new subject, and then for that, for separate education institution started. Now those things which church can manage, now here, moral ethics. Here, I think very much the concept of God, Creator, the whole world created by one source. So that actually is the concept of global responsibility. Whole globe does come from one source, and we are part of that. So some kind of
it acted as something that brought, at least in idea, together.
Now then eventually the church's influence in the society becoming limited. And I mean, frankly speaking, non-believers also now there. Although I think 1,000 years is non-believer there, but I think non-believer are more active, like that. And then also, there are different variety of religions. Some no sort of faith, no concept of creator. So there are now varieties. So in any way, so today, a body or institution which taking care about moral ethics now becoming some way a little bit weak. So now the modern education institution alone now should look after both fields, brain development as well as moral ethics side. So now here, generally, you see, we pay much more attention, adequate attention about education, but less attention about moral ethics. So since many years, since I think few decades in Europe and also America, some occasion I express, now time come, we have to carry some research. In India also, the Indian education system, modern education system is British introduced, so more Western education system. So obviously, sometimes you see that not include India's 1,000-year-old sort of traditions. So now more sort of research, and then the ethics in modern education subject. Now here you see the difficulty is they're not like other subject. You see, you can't. It's difficult to measure. Right? Measure. And give examination about amount of compassion. Difficult, isn't it? Yes. And then also is one problem here. Kasachuti. Some people, some my friend, you see, they believe moral ethics must be based on religious faith. Then a lot of complications, particularly like India. There are so many religious traditions there, so difficult. So obviously, I think basically two categories, theistic religion, non-theistic religion. So both very much sort of emphasis important for moral ethics, but approach is different. So then, in institution, in school or education field, now we must find some system aiming moral ethics, but without based on religious faith. Then can be universal. So that usually I describe secular way of education about ethics. So therefore, education very, very important.
Indeed.
But how to deal, I don't know. You know better. You know better.
Sometimes we're not sure we know either, Your Holiness. We understand you're a fan of technology. In fact, I just this morning, early, noticed that you are now on Twitter.
Oh.
Within the last 2 days, His Holiness has a Twitter account, and within only 2 days, I saw this morning as of about 6:30, there are 100,000, more than 100,000 people have subscribed to your Twitter account. I'm one of the newest ones. Technology is becoming more and more an important part of what we do in education. It can have its frustrations with some of our faculty who are here. I'm sure would describe to you students who have their cell phones in class that ring sometimes and can be disruptive, but it also has incredible opportunity through the internet and the web to reach out anywhere in the world now. What are your views on the role of technology in our society?
Oh, really wonderful. Really wonderful. But I myself is completely ignorant how to handle these things. The old type tape recorder, mechanical, old type, and camera as well. These digital camera, I cannot handle. Digital summary.
Digital technologies, His Holiness was saying it's beyond him.
Old type camera, yes, I myself also use it, and also sometimes a little damage I can repair. I think my skill, this hand, finger, I think like my own age. So this latest sort of technology I cannot handle. I don't know. Twitter. I think 3-4 days ago, I met some my friend. So they suggested that. Then looks is very, very useful. But of course, at that time also I mentioned, you can handle teaching matters.
So His Holiness already warned the person who made the suggestion that, this is a technology that is beyond me. I cannot handle this.
But of course, some my staff member, of course, they have some knowledge. So like that, because overall, the technology, I think, really makes our life easier and immense benefit. And then meantime, technology is technology. Whether it can be constructive or destructive depends on the user. User's motivation, more compassionate, more sense of responsibility. Also the long-sighted and holistic sort of approach, holistic view. Then these things can be positive, constructive. If the user, too much emotion, negative emotion, the sole aim is destroy someone. Then this technology also can be destructive. So ultimately, it depends on user, isn't it? Like that.
Yes.
So therefore, the technology itself, you see, no feeling, no cognitive. So technology itself cannot make distinction, moral or right or wrong. Mm-hmm. So these things are living technology here, brain, sophisticated computer here. You see, it's only its role, moral or immoral, or good or bad, these things. Yes?
I know, Your Holiness, that all of my friends and colleagues here on this stage believe strongly in the importance of global education. We here at Broward College, as an example, have many of our faculty members who participate in partnerships that we have with other institutions in Singapore and Sri Lanka and many Latin American countries. We have approximately 65,000 students this year, and there will be within that student population this year students who were born in over 157 different nations. So global education, in a sense, comes naturally here. It organically has happened. And I know all of our education partners here have similar stories. As you have traveled in other countries and visited other institutions, are there things that we should try to learn that others are doing well in other countries and other education institutions?
I don't know. Really, I don't know. I think the modern education system is more or less universal. So one I noticed, of course, the modern education really brings, I think, openness in their mind. I noticed in South Africa and also in Jordan, some young student who speak English fluently, and also is really educated in according to the modern system. Whether in Africa, whether in Muslim country, or whether in India, everywhere. You see, I think the similar sort of thinking. So much easier to communicate. Then those native people who still not sort of modern educated, then their own sort of tradition something a little bit isolated. So then difficult. So that I notice. So modern education is so important, and like this institution. There's so many countries. I mean, students come from so many countries and study together, and knowing each other is extremely useful. That's really, I think, very, very effective sort of contribution for develop the global citizen, global community. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Let me open up now to possibly some questions from some of our other stage guests. President Ferraro.
Your Holiness, let me just follow up with President Armstrong's last question. This country has had a long history of students coming from around the world to be educated in the United States. That's an enormous cost to the student and or the family and or their government, one of those sources. What is your feeling about the responsibility of American universities when invited, bringing education to a host country?
Yesterday, my public talk, or I think yesterday morning, I think you were there. No, I mentioned some American values: democracy, openness, transparent, free information. I think these values, I think universal value. I think some problems we are facing Like in our own case, they're dealing with Chinese, not Chinese as a whole, but Chinese is a communist. See, they grown up with certain sort of, training, or ideologically training. So it seems to see their mind not open enough.
Fixed. Fixed.
Something fixed. And I think they carry certain sort of activities on the basis of their own mental projection picture. So former Soviet Union also, you see, carry that. And then there's some in Arab countries also, you see, I think, because the 2 centuries remain isolated. So little knowledge about outside world. Compare that, I think India, because of British sort of ruler introduced English language and modern education. So Indian, I think, generally speaking, I think much, much better to deal with outside world. So as a result, now India, perhaps I think other sort of the factor also there, but one thing, India's democracy, rule of law, freedom of speech. So compare some of the neighboring states, India is much, much stable. Even some problems here and there always come surface, that's all. Others country, closed society, some unrest there, but all suppressed. So essentially, more serious. So therefore, the American, when you carry some help or program in education in other country, I think American, values, the universal values, democracy, openness, free speech, and then independent judiciary, these things I think very important. Some country were not happy these things, but I think worthwhile to educate people. This I feel. So yesterday, I expressed, sometimes in recent sort of months, or recently after economic crisis, worldwide economic crisis happened, some people, even praising authoritarian system, the capitalist system, free market. Some people, a little doubt, right? That's, I think not, because it is not correct. I think human society, not only money, but other values. Ultimately, the money also is related with these fundamental rights or fundamental value. So American should feel proud your traditional value, democracy, freedom, freedom of faith, freedom of expression, and independent free media, and independent judiciary. I think these you should feel proud. So economic field, economical aspect, some difficulties, but that does not mean America failing. No, there are other values there. Some economy sort of progress cannot compete these basic human values. That I think.
The women came prepared with your books over here. You speak about the art of happiness and the pursuit of happiness, and that is just a basic human desire. But then you also talk about the need for inner restraint, which I would say to you we have not been exercising well given the world condition. So I just wanted to ask you,
Discipline. Discipline. Yes.
I wanted to ask you to talk more about that inner restraint, that goal of inner restraint.
Oh. I think usually I say self-discipline. Discipline not imposed by some higher authority. No. That kind of discipline is really oppressive. Now here, I think most cases, the spiritual sort of discipline, and also in the society, discipline means some kind of protection of oneself. Now some people who have because of the high blood pressure, then doctor suggested you should avoid certain sort of things, types of food, and then restrain. That's not that's the self-discipline for sake of your own interest. Your tongue may want to say something, but use here, oh, this is not good for my health. So then discipline. So that's self-discipline, not imposing by someone. From outside, like that. So that's self-discipline. Something else. Now, now I think problem, we usually, take take like anger, fear, jealousy, suspicion, these things we take for granted, part of normal mind. Then sometimes circumstances also causing more anger, more suspicion, more fear. And if you take for granted, not because of that. That is charging position.
So if you treat this occurrence of these negative and destructive emotions to be simply just natural thing,
then because of the circumstances, these negative emotion then more often come. Eventually, the person's basic sort of nature then becoming more
agitated.
agitative. So therefore, part of our mind, compassion, love, forgiveness, these also part of our mind. So the negative emotion, because of the circumstances, is more often arise. Then under such circumstances, we must pay more attention about other aspect of our emotion, which is essentially counterbalance. So that's why I think those destructive emotion restrain, try to minimize. And these, as a counterforce, these positive emotion then deliberately should increase. Now, for example, the air controller is when more cold come, then the heat system should increase. Then become outside too hot, then inside also is too hot, then you should increase the cool
Cold temperature.
cold temperature. Similarly, although these different emotions are part of our mind, but calculate some of these emotions are very harmful, not only disturb our peace of mind, but also very much harmful for our health, body health. Constant fear, constant anger, hatred. Actually, some scientists mentioned to me these some emotions such as hatred, fear, actually eating our immune system. So like compassion, these is the emotion, very, very useful to maintain our immune system. Some cases even increasing. I think that's quite logical. I think our body, originally our body used to come through, grown up in the atmosphere of mother's care, mother's affection, and also family member. If everybody take affection, show affection, take care, the children grown very well. Sometimes there is a danger to spoil. But of course we can make correction nicely. So you see these children, bodily much healthier, particularly the brain much more healthy. So those children who grown up cold atmosphere or beating, abuse, then very difficult. Then these children, and the rest of their life becoming some kind of person. You see, no feeling at all others' pain, others' suffering. Then these often can manipulate. Give some money and go to kill that person. They will do, because no feeling of others' pain. Isn't it? Like that. So therefore, discipline, self-discipline, out of reasons, out of, now, there are, contradictions. Short-term interest, short-term desire, long-term interest. So sometimes there are contradictions, conflict. So then we have to take seriously the long-term consequences. For that reason, some short-term, even though you want, but self-discipline. So actually, protection of your own happiness. So no contradiction. So no contradiction, isn't it? I think put self-discipline. Discipline, just word discipline. Then there are other discipline imposed by other force. That's really terrible.
Thank you, Your Holiness. President? Yes, sir.
I've had the pleasure of being in your company now 5 times and hearing your words of wisdom. And I've had an opportunity also to read your books. Your profession of the core values of the United States are most appreciated by me: life, liberty, freedom, democracy, the pursuit of happiness. Those concepts came about during the Age of Enlightenment, and one man that was our 3rd president, who's also a native Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, he professed the same thing. One statement he said for us educators, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was or never will be. Could you give us some advice of, as educators, wishing to have a nation that is not ignorant and free in a state of civilization. How do we convince those individuals that you mentioned that may wish to remain uneducated, who may wish to remain in more traditional aspects? How do we break that bond that they may voluntarily or involuntarily have? How do we break those chains of the lack of freedom that they have so that they would like to have the pursuit of education?
I think there are, as far as I notice, there are two categories. One category was some native people. I noticed in Latin America. It's some one time I was in Colombia or something, Peru, or I don't know, one country. There are some indigenous people come to see me, and they are very much concerned about the preservation of their own culture, their own identity, and for that reason, they prefer remain isolated. Then a similar sort of the indigenous people, like they call such a thing. Yes, in New Zealand is the Maori people, and then also the Samiland people. Sometimes people call Laplander. In northern Scandinavian country. So now, for example, the Samiland people in Norway, in northern Norway, they're thoroughly educated through Norwegian language and thoroughly educated. But at the same time, you see, they carry preservation of their own identity, their own culture, their own language also. So they, I have sort of strong sort of view that the Samiland's method for preservation of their own identity, their own culture through modern education is the right one. In America also, is some small pockets of native Indians. On one occasion I met some of their representatives. They are very much concerned about preservation of their own language and their own identity. It is right. But then I asked, how many population? On one occasion, one say their own tribe, about 2,000, 3,000, like that. And very difficult to preserve. And then also, often I ask such indigenous people whether they have script or not. Then in many cases, no script, just oral. So then I suggested to them that you must have a script, written script, then Romanized script. If traditionally no written script, then must invent some script. So with modern education and preserve their own culture, their own identity. Then within ancient culture, heritage, I think it is really worthwhile to make distinction. As far as Tibetan is concerned, right from the beginning, you see, our main concern and effort is preservation of Tibetan culture. But within the culture, some form of culture, aspects, some of the aspects of culture, the social sort of creation, the social condition change. Then these will change, have to change. No use to preserve. One aspect of culture, heritage, is something very useful. So that culture we can preserve because there is reasons. And if we explain properly, then people realize it is something useful to preserve. So that kind of culture really worthwhile to preserve. And some cultural heritage actually, according to the reality, outdated. They are no use to preserve. So some, even religious as a tradition, most these, because of the ancient religion, you see, come at the time of, because of the, more than 1,000 years ago. So the religious, Buddhism also uses some concept, you see, they develop according to the existing social system. So that part, now the social system change. The social sort of way of life change. Then some sort of rules which you see mentioned at that time according to the social sort of system. Then these, I think, should change. Some occasion I express. For example, in India. Now, India I usually consider my second home. Now, last 50 years, now 51 years, I live in India. Then my body survived with Indian rice and Indian dal. And my mind, the Indian, sort of was a ancient Indian thought. Buddhism come from India. So I can see, I usually consider, these last year, you see, we carried 50th anniversary since we come to India. So there are some occasion I described, I am son of India, in the sense, as I mentioned earlier, this body survived by Indian food, and my mind is filled by Indian ancient thought. So it's actually the son of India. But some of the Chinese communist ear, you see, this sounds very, very negative. So they accuse me like that. So in any way, in India, sometimes I express some of their custom, which essentially outdated. Sometimes with the human rights concept, according to their 1,000-year-old tradition, sometimes a little conflict. Then we must accept the universal value. Some of the traditional custom have to sacrifice. That's how I feel. And then another category, deliberately, I think political reason. That mainly power is involved. And sometimes deliberately, because of that, try to isolate. So like that. So, the precise question have you.
His Holiness was wondering whether you could be more precise.
In the United States, there's no saying you can take a horse of water, but you can't make them drink. How do you convince those individuals who do not wish to be educated to be educated? How do you get someone to thirst for education in a world that seems sometimes not to promote education?
And I think most children I think may not have keen interest for study. In my own case, you see, when I was, began to study, no interest at all for study, just for holiday or play. So sometimes compulsory to study. So that, I think, same. But then, as I mentioned earlier, like some of these indigenous people who really concerned about preservation of their own identity and their own culture and method isolate. That's actually suicide. So, I think education, whether the children's side, willingly or not, education is very, very important. Without education, you can't be a productive human being, or eventually you will not be a happy person. Ignorant, or completely ignorant, very dull. Then okay, like animal, just the feeding and shelter, and then sex. That's all, nothing else. That may be satisfied, or unfortunately, of course, this is not political statement, but you know, in some communist countries, you see, they really put a lot of sort of censorship and distorted information. So that actually, you see, they want their own subject remain ignorant, no other ideas. So what they told, they should believe that. So communism is the best. Capitalism is imperialist sort of system, very bad. Now they copying, very sort of rashly, copying American sort of values. When I was in China, 1954, 55, they always say America is #1 enemy, imperialist. And Russia is the #1 friend. And eventually turned different way. So these are narrow-minded, and they deliberately put people in ignorance. So I always stress the transparency. Democracy, China, democracy is concerned, sometimes I feel because of that, all the certain democratization, I think too much chaotic situation may develop. That's nobody's interest. So gradual change. But the transparent and freedom of press, that's very essential. Now they always say, people's government, people's republic, people's court, people's liberation army, people first. Then, meantime, fooling people. Isn't it? This is really wonderful. So people must inform what is going on. And over 1 billion Chinese people have the capacity to judge what is right or what is wrong. Must give them thorough information. They have every right to know the reality. There's no moral sort of background censorship. Why? And too much sort of distorted information. But this is not political statement. Please don't write. Some media people, they out of whole our conversation, just as you pick up one word or Dalai state such things. Not good.
We understand.
I just express what I feel like that.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, you are a great teacher and you speak to a very large audience. And amongst that audience are leaders of countries. And sometimes you're more successful than others with some leaders. Much like in this room, you have a room full of teachers and educators who reach their students, some better than others. Yesterday you spoke about with positive influence on the response to Haiti of other countries.
Yes.
In order to respond like that, countries generally have to have success as a country and success with their personal image as a country, their national image as a country. Same way with teachers and students. You can reach some students easier than others, and largely the ones you can't reach, it's often much like Dr. Hanbury, either they don't want to learn or their self-image, their self-worth might not be where it needs to be. As a teacher, how would you suggest that we reach people with a better understanding of their individual worth? And yesterday you spoke of your commitments, the individual, what's inside the individual as part of the collective, as part of the nation, as part of the world. How do you get people to understand that their value as people really matters to what happens to everyone?
Yes, when we think about global crisis, then one individual, very tiny, insignificant. But the change, on the other hand, if we think it properly or systematic, then naturally there's a change on this planet, or is facing because of the certain effort to overcome certain sort of problem. Initiative or the job on our shoulder. Nobody's because of the shoulder. The problem which we humanity facing. Now we humanity ourselves must face these challenges and find ways and means to overcome these. So then when we talk humanity, there's no something humanity there beside ourselves. No. 6 billion humanity from 1, 2, 10, 100,000, 10,000 like that. So 6 billion must come through one. So you are that one. So change must come through one. Then 10, 100, 1,000, lakhs, or 100,000, million, like that. So initiative must come through individual. So judging that, you have some sort of potential to make some contribution for change of the world or make better world. So in any way, someone must come, must carry initiative. Everybody is waiting, come someone. It's a mistake. Ourselves, as our own moral responsibility, do something. Whether achieve or not, that's a different question. It is our moral responsibility. And also it's some goal, goal, something worthwhile to achieve. Make an attempt. No question whether that goal, whether materialize my lifetime or not. That's a different question. Sometimes, or something, if materialize within my lifetime, then worthwhile make an attempt. If too big, too long, then you shall. Leave it. That's wrong. We have to start. Particularly this generation. Now here, you are not too old and too young, so you are the generation who got the, I think, deeper experience what happened in 20th century. Now we are supposed showing a path to coming generation, which our experience, what we collected from previous century. Previous century, actually, I think there are many good things there. As you see, you mentioned using these marvelous technology, these things you see, invented in that 20th century. But in 20th century, according to some historian, over 200 million human beings killed. And nuclear weapon actually used on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that century is really terrible. Century I usually call century of bloodshed. So nobody like that. Nobody want that. Repeat. So it is our responsibility, this generation's responsibility, to tell younger generation, if the previous sort of trend, just power, disregard moral ethics, the result, suffering, immense suffering. So we have to tell our younger generation, now think more the sort of also the other side, which more safeguard for peace, happy, tranquility, like that, isn't it? So it is our responsibility. Make an attempt. If fail, no regret. At the time of death, no regret. I done my best. Okay. And I think the next generation, who eventually going to face some problem, they also say, oh, our elder show us right way, but ourselves fail. Now we can't blame on them. Okay. Otherwise, they may say, oh, our elder not showing us the right path. They may, nowadays, we Tibetan, at least myself, say, I often blame our previous generations. They made mistake. So I think maybe the grandfather or grandmother, so your grandchildren, eventually they may criticize their parent, or they neglected, yes, neglected. So in any way, human generation, I think at least the next few thousand, I think we have to remain like this. Some complain, but within that, we have to make every effort be better world. Isn't it? And also, I think we can't rely totally on God, or those people who believe God. So God created this, but at the same time, there are a lot of problems there that we have to solve this problem. If we put all the responsibility to God and just pray, that's unrealistic. We have to work.
Your Holiness, you speak a lot about inner peace and all of the positive values. Just for especially our students, how does one deal with hatred and terror and conflict that one may face individually, even though they want to exemplify the high values that you speak about, when there is someone perhaps pressing them to act in a way that's perhaps not of high value? What do you suggest they do?
Of course, that's difficult. But for me, from my experience, it's the holistic look. Now, that makes differences. Even the event, if you look more wider way, there could be some positive things also you can see. Then also you see they're facing the tragedy. Also from the wider perspective, there are not just you, there are many people. So when we just think oneself and not looking more holistic, or more wider way, then you see, mind really almost become like prison, right? And thinking just one sort of problem, one event, and actually self-centered, sort of egoistic sort of perspective. Then, think just oneself. Then, whole your attitude becomes smaller, narrow. Then small problem also appears something very big, unbearable. Same tragedy, same problem. If you look from wider perspective, then not much sort of serious. Even you see the quite serious sort of problem for yourself. But okay, there, if you look from wider perspective. So I think maybe Kasota is useful to look problem itself from Kasota, from various angles. And then also if you think humanity as a whole, there are millions of people, then billions of people who are facing the same problem, but comparatively, now for example in America, comparatively much better, fortunate. There are democracy, there are system, judiciary, Kasota system, and everything is much better than some remote area. I think some of these African sort of state and some Asian state, some remote area, no, because of the basic facilities. So remember these, then you feel, fortunate. So sometimes I usually, I express, American student, go different part of the world, then you will realize how fortunate your own country, your own area. And then still, the gap, another sort of there, I think global, because of that, global one issue is the gap rich and poor. So global level also is this big gap, rich and poor. And within the nation, America, some time back I was told the number of the billionaire increasing, but poorer people still living there. One time in Washington, I expressed the most richest country's capital, but what called suburbs is Washington. There are many poor people. So we have to address very, very seriously how to reduce this. Not by force, but by education and effort. The poorer section of people, give them education and give them expertise and equipment and give them courage. Right. So in India also, one day, one family member, so someone who's come from Bombay to see me, and one lady, she told me she want to receive some blessing. Then I told her, I have nothing, so-called some blessing. I have no. I myself need blessing. Then you have the sort of potential to get blessing. That's your wealth. So some portion, without damage of your sort of capital, you see, utilize some money for education and health to some slums in Bombay city. Help them. That is the real sort of source of blessing. So that's the way you get blessing. So like that, those richer family, richer community, provide because of that facilities, education, health, training, expertise, these things. Then mentally respect them. Show them your affection, your concern. Then mentally this gap reduces. Otherwise, poorer section of people, sometimes jealousy, more frustration, frustration transform anger, anger transform violence. So this is one of the very, very, because of the serious issue, how to reduce. Like the communists, once they reduce to everybody become poor. That also not correct. And now you see some change. So billionaires in China, socialist country, but huge gap region poor. That's unthinkable as a socialist country. Yes, yes, that is true. In spite of your attitude reasonable, but the other side not do same way. But then think. This is second way. Think more proper, more deeper way. If I retaliate, what result? Even things become worse. Then you practice tolerance. And in spite of their negative attitude, if you keep positive attitude, then there is much chance their attitude will change. If you take similar sort of attitude, tough or arrogant, then their attitude becoming more harder. So that may remain years. There's a Tibetan, among Tibetan, there's a tradition, although they consider something heroic sort of tradition. The grandparents' time was something, some quarrel. Then there are generations, whole generations, they keep that and then take opportunity. Once they have the opportunity, they revenge. That's foolish. So just a few days ago, Dharamsala is some Tibetan from very remote area, Tibet, used to come to see me, and they told me, in their remote area, still that practice is there. So they asked me, please, you must mention name of their own place. That kind of practice is totally sort of wrong. He mentioned that. So like that, you see, if you treat, in spite of their attitude, negative attitude, if you remain calm, then I think the other person, sensible person, then eventually will change. That's much better. Of course, physical sort of danger come, then you should run away. Isn't it? I often is telling people, if mad dog come, then you still say, patience, and compassion. That's foolish. Must run away.
Thank you, Your Holiness. We're coming very close to the end of our time. We only have a couple of minutes left. Many people off stage are telling me. President Law here, I will give the honor of one last question for a few brief comments before we bring the program to an end.
Thank you very much. Your Holiness.
Yes, now yes.
Yesterday in your comments, you mentioned environmental concerns several times. Would you take a few minutes just to talk to us about our responsibility in face of the environmental issues we face?
Firstly, according to my own experience, you see the reaction to violence immediately come. But then for environment degeneration, not that kind of so striking. Without notice, gradually degenerate. So once we noticeable, you see some eye problem or breathing problem, then maybe too late. So therefore, educate about importance of environment is very, very essential. Make awareness through radio or through newspaper, through media, and also through education, like that. And then taking care about environment, not just a few slogans, but taking care about the environment, it should be part of your daily life. So that, for my thinking, my experience, that usually, whenever I left the hotel room, I always switch off the light. Then water, I never take
Use bathtubs.
Bathtubs. In my own house in Dharamsala, previously one bathtub, later I removed that. Only shower. But shower 2 times a day. So some contradiction, isn't it?
Thank you, Your Holiness.
And then I want to share, you see, about the ecology in Asia. Of course, no relation with America directly. I think indirectly, maybe Tibet as a roof of the world, and some change that, and plateau that also see affect India's monsoon, and also in monsoon in China. So that way, indirectly, may have some connection with this part of the world. But at least in Asia, some Chinese ecologist, some academician, I saw, I think, 2 years ago, one Irish ecologist, one scientist. He showed me one article wrote by some Chinese academician. They describe Tibetan plateau as the third pole, because the affection to global warming, as much as North Pole, South Pole, Tibet plateau, also very, very important factor. So he described Tibetan plateau, third pole. So, and they say the global warming rate, in global level, 0.1. Tibetan plateau, 0.3, they say. So that's, I think, perhaps one new information. So we, now Indians also, you see, they're taking serious sort of notice, and now Chinese academician also, you see, they taking sort of serious sort of notice. But then government level, they only think about exploitation of nature resources, minings like that. So just a few days, just before, I think 2 or 3 days ago, before I leaving America, I met one Tibetan. In his own village, this is some mining carried by Chinese officials, communist officials. They don't know, but some animals, domestic animals, as well as wild animal, many died. I think water polluted or something. So it happened like that. So now, hopefully, with these scientists, including Chinese scientists, they are sort of giving warning. Maybe eventually government may take as of the serious notice. But you know, in many, I think during Dorungchin, Prime Minister, you know, the former Prime Minister Dorungchin, when he was there, because at that time, because of unprecedented flood which took place in China proper. So they found in Tibetan area, a lot of last few decades, a lot of deforestation. So they found some connection, that flood and the deforestation in upper area of Tibet, southeast Tibet, and border with Burma. I think greatest of the forest in Asia. So the government at that time used to put some restriction. But then corruption through pocket, the local officials and some Chinese businessmen, you see, they still carry these deforestations, like that, cutting, like that. So global issue is very, because of global, environment issue. Environment issue is very serious. Or sometimes you see some people have the impression now scientific sort of highly developed and technology, so we can control nature. I think that's unrealistic. Ultimately, we still remain under nature. So we have to take seriously about nature pattern. Nature's law, like that. We must realize we are part of the nature. So sometimes some people describe Mother Earth, right? Earth Mother Earth. I think that word is very nice, isn't it? Earth provides us oxygen and everything. So if something goes wrong, then I think that's a simple answer for all our trouble and all humanity diminish, then no longer any problem. Whether God acceptable or not, the eventually world will change, will go. Like that. A sun itself, after 5 billions of years, our sun also will change, will disappear. Anyway, no question. So these also sometimes is helpful. Look, eons. Then our life, just 100 years.
So when you take that kind of really vast vantage point, it put things in perspective.
And then also, the picture from space, take world, blue planet, very beautiful. But in it, a lot of trouble. but looks, no national boundary, isn't it? Just one planet. These pictures also, you see, helpful to bring idea. We are just one planet. 6 billion human beings remain there, just one home, blue planet. Isn't it? Sometimes we American feel America, and we Asian, we feel Asia, African, like that. From planet, nothing, just one small planet.
Your Holiness, you have now been in 50 years in your second home of India. This college is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. So for even more reasons, we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We were very pleased to be able to award you the first bachelor's degree from this college yesterday, and we thank you for accepting that on behalf of our faculty and our Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we thank you for your time with us today. Please join me in thanking His Holiness for being with us today.
Generally, you see that very limited. So images of danger, see or feel, then take protection. Beyond that, not much concern, not much knowledge. But we human beings, now another sort of also the potential, capacity. You see, think much sort of as the long-term or much larger area. Here, education have the important role. You see, make known these factors, and then how to deal these things. I think education, I feel, the main purpose of education is guide us the proper sort of life or our goal, happy life. So now today, of course, I think the whole world, whether they can do or not, that's a different matter, but everybody realize education is so important. However, I feel whether I think it's something wrong, then please make correction. You know, I always have this sort of view, and also mention to share other people. In the European continent, and 1,000 years ago, about 1,000 years ago, you know, the separate education institutions started. So that means the church sort of was the theology is not sufficient. So there are many more new subjects. So it is necessary to create separate education institution. So seems at that time, those subjects, church can sort of say manage. And those something new subject, and then for that, for separate education institution started. Now those things which church can manage, now here moral ethics. Here I think very much the concept of God, creator, the whole world created by one source. So that actually is the concept of global responsibility. Whole globe does it come from one source, and we are part of that. So some kind of
it acted as something that brought, at least in idea, together.
Now then eventually the church's influence in the society becoming limited. And I mean, frankly speaking, non-believers also now there. Although I think 1,000 years is non-believer there, but I think non-believer are more active. I think, of course, firstly, I'm not educationist. I have no experience or knowledge about the modern education. Your question, I think all, what's it, usually we call sentient being, the being who have cognitive sort of capacity, and accordingly, some thinking power. So we are one of them. Then all, by nature, they are, their purpose is to survive. Even non-sentient beings, like plant, these also have the right to survive, existence. So it's a certain, even chemical level, they have some sort of capacity how to survive. So then those beings who have the cognitive power also, I think eye conscience here, these things, they help us for survival. Generally now, like that. And then also, there are different variety of religions. Some no sort of faith, no concept of creator. So there are now varieties. So in any way, so today, the body or institution which taking care about moral ethics now becoming some way a little bit weak. So now the modern education institution alone now should look after both fields, brain development as well as moral ethics side. So now here, generally, you see, we pay much more attention, adequate attention about education, but less attention about moral ethics. So since many years, since I think few decades in Europe and also America, some occasion I express, now time come, we have to carry some research. In India also, the Indian education system, modern education system is British introduced, so more Western education system. So obviously, they sometimes you see that not include.
Your Holiness, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. On stage, we have leaders of higher education institutions, several of whom you've already met. We enjoyed our ceremony with you yesterday in conjunction with Nova Southeastern, our wonderful partner across the street. We know that you've had a ceremony today also at Florida Atlantic University, also one of our partners, and we now welcome you to Broward College. Thank you for being here. This event originally was going to be just a conversation between those of us in leadership roles about higher education, but we thought what a wonderful opportunity to open up to our community, and so we have some faculty and teachers here and some students as well. I will ask you a couple of questions, Your Holiness, to start off, and then we'll open it up as we move forward and invite our other panelists here on stage to join us as well.
Good.
So, I'll start, if it's okay.
Yes.
Your Holiness, in many of your books and public talks, you have emphasized that all members of the global community are profoundly interdependent, economically, environmentally, and in many other ways. And therefore, it's essential that we cultivate a sense of universal responsibility. In your view as educators, how should we in our higher education communities provide leadership in this responsibility to our global community?